They say betrayal doesn't come with warning. It creeps in silently, in the small details you almost miss, until suddenly it strikes like a knife. That evening, I only wanted to deliver some files to my boss, nothing more. I worked late at the office, and Mr. Harris asked me to stop by his home on my way back. It was normal. He trusted me with numbers, reports, and deals. I respected him for giving me chances when others ignored me. I never thought his home would be the place where my world began to fall apart. The night air was cool as I walked down his quiet street. I remember the way the streetlights glowed faintly orange, and how the leaves rustled in the trees above. My shoes crunched softly against the gravel. I was thinking about what I'd say once I got inside updates on the quarterly report, some figures he wanted me to finalize. Just office matters. But then I saw it. A car parked near the side of his gate. My heart recognized it before my eyes did. The small dent above the left tire. The sticker on the back window. It was my wife's car. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks. It can't be hers, I told myself. Maybe it belonged to someone else. Maybe she'd lent it to a friend. But deep down, something in my chest tightened like a fist. Because Sarah, my wife, had told me she was visiting her mother that evening. Her mother lived 2 hours away. So why was her car here? I stood frozen, gripping the files tighter, staring at the car until the night seemed to grow colder around me. 1,000 excuses rushed through my head. Maybe she came by to drop something off. Maybe she wanted to surprise me. Maybe, but none of it made sense. I walked slowly up the driveway, every step heavier than the last. The porch light was dim, casting long shadows across the ground. The house looked quiet from the outside. Too quiet. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles touched the door, I heard something. Voices. Soft, muffled, slipping through the walls like smoke. I froze, my hand still hovering in the air. I leaned closer, pressing my ear against the wooden frame. The first voice was hers. Sarah. Her laugh was soft, almost nervous, but there was warmth in it, a warmth I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "What if he finds out?" she whispered. And then came another voice, low and steady. "My boss, Mr. Harris. He won't. He trusts both of us too much." The world tilted beneath my feet. The sound of his voice in that tone, calm, intimate, almost smug, hit me harder than any punch could. I stumbled back slightly, pressing my palm against the wall to keep myself steady. My ears rang, and for a moment, I thought maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was something else. Work talk, a joke, anything. But then she spoke again. "You make me forget myself," she said, her voice trembling yet filled with a softness I recognized. And then came his laugh, smooth, confident. "Then keep forgetting," he said. "He'll never suspect." My chest tightened, as if someone had wrapped a rope around it and pulled. My vision blurred. I could barely breathe. The files slipped from my hands, papers scattering across the porch like leaves caught in the wind. The sound was small, but to me it was thunder. I didn't bend to pick them up. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, my mind spinning with the realization of what I'd just heard. Sarah. My wife. The woman I shared my home, my bed, my dreams with. Inside my boss's house. Whispering words of love not meant for me. I don't know how long I stood there, trembling, staring at the door that separated me from the truth I never wanted to know. My ears burned with their laughter. My stomach twisted. A wave of nausea rose, but I swallowed it down. I wanted to burst in, to throw open that door and drag them both into the light, to scream, to demand answers, to destroy the lies in one strike. My fists clenched, my jaw tightened. But then another thought came. If I walked in now, they would deny it. They would turn it on me. They would make me the fool, the jealous husband, the paranoid worker. No, I couldn't let that happen. I forced myself to bend down, fingers shaking as I gathered the scattered pages. Each paper felt heavier than stone. My hands felt weak, almost numb, but I stacked them together and pressed them to my chest. Then I turned and walked away. Every step down that driveway felt like walking on glass. The porch light behind me dimmed further, as if the house itself was swallowing the truth I had just witnessed. I passed by her car again, my eyes burning as I looked at the familiar shape, the car she drove every day as if nothing was wrong. Now it was a symbol of betrayal. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked until the sound of my own footsteps drowned out the echo of their laughter. But deep inside, I knew. They thought they were safe behind his walls. They thought I was blind, naive, too trusting to ever suspect. But I had heard enough. That night, as I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, I made myself a promise. They had written their betrayal in whispers, but I would write my revenge in silence. And when the time was right, neither of them would see it coming. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow tick of the wall clock, feeling each second push a nail deeper into my chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the porch light, the scattered papers, and heard their voices in the dark. By dawn, my pillow was cold, and my face felt stiff, like I had a mask on instead of skin. When the alarm rang, I got up anyway. In the kitchen, the kettle hissed. Sarah moved around softly, humming a tune she hadn't hummed in months. She wore a pale blue blouse and tied her hair higher than usual. A new gloss shone on her lips. The small details cut like glass. "Morning," she said without turning. "You came in late. Long day?" "Yeah," I answered, steady as I could. "Reports." She slid a cup of tea toward me and leaned against the counter. "I might go see Mom again today," she said. "She's been complaining about that old heater. It clicks." My heart thudded once, heavy and loud. I stirred the tea so I wouldn't have to look up. I said. "Do you want me to call someone? A repair guy?" No. I'll check first." She glanced at her phone on the table face down. "Maybe I'll stay over." I nodded, took a slow sip, and pretended the tea didn't taste like ash. In that moment, I realized something important. The worst part of betrayal isn't the act, it's the performance afterward. The brightness, the normal voice, the clean casual lies. It told me how long this had been growing behind my back, how skilled they had become at walking around it. I washed my cup, dried it, and kissed her cheek. Her perfume, something citrus and sweet, clung to me even after I picked up my bag. It felt like a stain I couldn't wash off. The office looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Fluorescent lights hummed, keyboards clicked, printers warmed. People greeted each other with the same Monday voices. I walked to my desk, placed the files down, and sat very still for a moment, feeling the chair take my weight like it had 100 times before. "Hey," Maya said softly from the cubicle over, peeking around the divider. "You okay? You look not okay." "I'm fine," I said, because that's what people say when they're not fine. She narrowed her eyes. "Mr. Harris wants you in his office at 9. Said to bring the Q3 vendor list." "Got it." I forced a small smile. "Thanks." At 8:59 I knocked on Harris's glass door. He waved me in. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Calm eyes. A practiced, easy smile. If I hadn't heard his voice the night before, I would have thought he was a good man. He'd given me a chance when I needed a job 2 years ago. He'd praised my diligence. He'd told me I had potential. "Morning," he said. "Rough night?" "A bit," I answered. "Numbers kept me up." He chuckled. "You and those numbers." He gestured to the chairs. "Sit, please." I did. He walked around behind me to pour coffee, and for a second I smelled a very faint trace of the same citrus note, the kind that was clinging to my shirt from Sarah's skin. My stomach twisted. "Vendor list?" he asked, placing a mug near my hand. I passed it to him. He flipped through calmly, nodding at the totals like nothing strange lived in the air between us. "I'll need you to stay late a few nights this week," he said casually. "We're close to the audit window. I trust you to keep things airtight." "Of course." His gaze held mine a second longer. "I appreciate discretion," he added, voice low and smooth. On business matters. You understand. I do, I said, and tasted the word like a joke. When I left his office, my hands felt colder than before. I sat down and stared at the screen until the numbers stopped swimming. I made a choice then. I would not rush. I would not let my anger make me clumsy. I would move the way quiet water moves, slow, patient, steady. I would gather facts. I would make a record that could not be argued with. People can argue with feelings. They can't argue with timestamps. At lunch, I walked to the parking garage. Sarah's car keys hung on a little blue keychain with a chipped silver heart. I had copied the spare last year when she kept misplacing it, thinking it would help on busy mornings. The thought stabbed me now. I opened her car and sat for a moment, listening to the cool echo of the garage. In the glove box, I found a toll receipt from the evening before, 7:41 p. M. Same side of town as Harris's neighborhood. A simple thing. A small thing. But the kind that becomes a nail in a long row of nails. I took a photo of it on my phone and put it back exactly as it was. Then I walked outside and leaned on the warm hood and called Sarah's mother. She answered on the second ring. Beta? Auntie, I said softly, keeping my voice calm. Did Sarah visit you yesterday? I'm trying to plan dinner and... Oh, no, she said. I haven't seen her this week. Tell her to call me, though. The heater is making that clicking sound again. My heart fell to my shoes. I will, I said. Take care. After I hung up, the garage felt colder. Even under the noon Sunday, the lie wasn't light anymore. It had weight. That evening I told Sarah I had to work late at the office. Audit prep, I said, tapping the white lie like it was sturdy furniture. She nodded too quickly. No problem. I might go to Mom's again, she said, eyes sliding for a second toward her phone. She needs me. I drove to a small grocery store near Harris's Street and parked where I could see the gate. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my gums. The steering wheel felt like a metal bar under my hands. Rain began, thin at first, then steady. Streetlights turned the drops into shining beads. I rolled my window down just enough for air. Each car that passed made my chest seize in fear and hope at the same time. At 7:25 p.m., Sarah's car turned onto the road. I watched her park in the same spot as last night, the one tucked by the hedges, half hidden from the street. She sat in the car for a moment, checked her reflection, and applied a soft color to her lips. My throat filled with heat. She got out with a small umbrella, walked quickly to the gate, and pressed the bell. The porch light clicked on. The door opened. He stood there, framed in warm light, and his smile was a private thing. He reached out and took the umbrella from her hand as if it belonged to him. They went inside. I looked at the clock on my dashboard and wrote the time down in a small notebook I had bought that afternoon. My hands barely felt like they belonged to me, but I wrote anyway. 7:28 p.m. Sarah enters Harris's house. Under it, I added the date and the weather. I waited. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere, then stopped. Rain softened into mist. My wipers sighed back and forth. I thought about our wedding, about her nervous hands holding mine, about the way she had looked at me when we signed our first apartment lease. I thought about all the small mornings and quiet nights and shared grocery lists. At 8:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a message from Harris. Harris, can you email the vendor Delta sheet tonight? Need to glance before morning. I stared at the screen, then glanced at the glowing porch 100 yards away. I typed slowly. On it. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. I watched the dot that said he was typing again, then it vanished. The silence pressed against my ribs. At 9:03 p.m., the porch light flicked on again. The door opened. Sarah stepped out, tucked hair behind her ear, and smiled at something he said. He touched her elbow just on the edge of polite, just inside the line of intimate. She walked down the steps, opened her umbrella, and went to her car. He stood at the door a moment longer, watching, then flicked the light off. I wrote it down. 9:03 p.m. Sarah exits Harris's house. Next to it I wrote a single word, smiled. When I got home, Sarah was already in the kitchen, reheating soup. She looked up with that easy practice smile. "You ate?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "Come on," she said, reaching for a bowl. "You work too hard." I watched her shoulders, the way she moved with a new lightness, the way she hummed again without noticing. When she went to the living room to fetch the remote, her phone lit up on the counter with a notification from an unknown number. The preview said, "Same time tomorrow?" There were only 2 initials under the name, H. The room tilted. I made my face calm before she turned back. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Everything's perfect." The next morning, the office buzzed louder than usual. A memo flew around about performance reviews, next month raises, promotions, restructuring, the kind of memo that turns good people into careful ones, the kind of memo a boss can use like a lever. Maya dropped a file on my desk and lowered her voice. "You sure you're okay?" "I'm fine," I said. She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Listen, be careful around Harris right now. He's charming, but he has a history of getting too close to people he shouldn't. It always looks clean until it isn't." A cold line ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "Last year," she said, eyes flicking toward his office, "he hired a contractor who suddenly stopped showing up. The story was that she moved away. But the way he acted afterward, let's just say it wasn't grief." I swallowed. "Thanks for telling me." "Seriously," she whispered. "Keep your head down. Keep your work clean. And don't give him a reason to mess with you." I nodded and she walked away, leaving the words hanging like a warning sign. By noon, I had a plan. A small one. A quiet one. I bought a cheap prepaid phone on my break and set it up with a single purpose. To document. I took photos of the toll receipt, the street, the parking spot, the porch. I scanned the notebook pages and emailed them to a new account with a password only I knew. I checked the laws again and again on my phone, what I could record in public spaces, what I couldn't. I promised myself one rule. I would not break the law, and I would not break myself. That evening I told Sarah I needed to help the team late again. She kissed my cheek and said, "Don't work too hard," her voice sweet as tea. I parked down the street earlier this time. The sky was clear, the air sharp. I waited with the engine off, window cracked, watching moths circle a streetlight like tiny desperate moons. At 7:18 p.m., her car appeared. She parked. She looked in the mirror. Then she reached into the glove compartment and took out a small hair clip. I'd never seen white, delicate, shaped like a tiny leaf. She smiled at herself, fastened it, and stepped out. I lifted the prepaid phone, hands steady now, and took a picture of the time on my dashboard, the car, and the gate. Not because the photos would tell the whole story, but because each small truth belonged to a bigger truth. When the door opened, he stepped out farther than the night before, and I saw something I had missed. The ease of his body in his own doorway, the way his shoulders relaxed when he looked at her, the look of a man who believed he was safe. They went inside, the light shut. I waited. At 8:41, I saw movement in the window, the kind that tells you 2 people are standing too close. I looked away and stared at my hands, and the rage rose like fire. I pressed the steering wheel hard, until the pain in my palms grounded me. I breathed. I thought of the memo about reviews. I thought of our mortgage. I thought of the life I had been building like a careful wall, brick by brick, year by year. I thought of how easily people who feel safe can push others off the edge. At 9:07 p.m., they came out together. He handed her the umbrella and leaned in as if to say something meant for one person only. She laughed softly. He smiled in that private way again. I wrote it down. At home, Sarah showered longer than usual. When she came to bed, she smelled like rain and a new soap. She lay on her side with her back to me, phone under her pillow. In the dim light, I watched the rise and fall of her shoulders and felt a strange grief for a woman who was still alive but already gone. I turned my head and stared at the shadows on the ceiling until they blurred into a slow, heavy sleep. On the 3rd day, the ground shifted. I was packing my bag when Sarah said from the doorway, "Do Do you think you could drive me to Mom's today? I'll come back tomorrow. She says the heater is worse. I zipped the bag slowly. Sure, I said. Let me just call the office. She blinked, a small pause, then smiled. Okay, thanks. In the car, she acted light, pointing out a new cafe, laughing at a radio ad. But when we reached the turn that would lead to her mother's neighborhood, she touched my arm. Drop me at the bus stop, she said lightly. I'll pick up something for Mom first. Bus stop? I repeated, keeping my voice flat. Yeah, she said. It's easier. I nodded, pulled over, and watched her step out. She waved, turned toward the shop, and disappeared behind a corner. I waited 30 seconds, then eased back onto the road, took the long loop around the block, and parked where I could see the back lane behind the shops. 2 minutes later, she reappeared on the other side, walking the opposite direction, toward a rideshare pickup point. The car that stopped for her was too clean, too new, too fast. I followed from a distance as carefully as I could without being obvious. The rideshare moved through the midday traffic, turned near the park, and finally slowed in a familiar area. Harris's Street. My mouth went dry. I parked in a spot that gave me a slice of view through the trees. She stepped out, looked around once, then walked quickly to the gate. The door opened before she reached it, as if someone had been waiting near the bell. I didn't take a picture this time. I didn't write the time. I just sat with my hands open on my knees, feeling the quiet slam shut inside my chest. My phone buzzed. MOMINLAW, Beta, will Sarah come today? I can arrange the heater man for tomorrow. I stared at the message until it doubled. Then I typed, she's picking something up. She'll call you. I turned off my phone. I laid my head back and closed my eyes. And in that darkness I made room for one more decision. I would stop looking for a softer explanation. There wasn't one. The facts were clean and hard. The lies were clean and soft. That was the difference. By the time I drove away, the sun had shifted, and the shadows from the trees were long lines like bars on the street. At home that night, Sarah sat across from me at the table and told me about her day with Mom, about the tea they had, about the old photos they looked at. She added small, sweet details like sugar, the kind that make a lie easier to swallow. When she went to rinse her cup, she reached to push a loose hair behind her ear. The white leaf clip caught the light and flashed. I watched the flash. I watched my life. I watched the quiet trap close, not around me, but around them. I smiled gently and said, I'm glad you had a good day. Inside, I began to plan the next part of my silence. The days that followed felt like walking through smoke. Everything looked normal from the outside, morning tea, office files, small talk with neighbors, but inside, my chest was heavy, and my mind was always somewhere else. I had proof now. Enough pieces to see the picture clearly. Her car at his house, the late-night messages, the toll receipt, her lies about her mother, the hair clip that wasn't mine to know. It all fit too perfectly. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I carried my silence like a blade hidden under my jacket, sharp, waiting. One evening, Sarah sat across the table, stirring her soup more than eating it. She looked up suddenly and smiled in that new way I had grown to hate sweet, but too polished. You've been quiet lately, she said softly. Work, I muttered. Work, she echoed. Always work. The way she said it felt like a jab. As if she was planting a seed in the story she would tell later. He was too busy, too distant. Betrayers always build excuses. I forced a small laugh. I guess numbers don't argue with me. She tilted her head, eyes studying me for a beat too long. Then she reached across the table and touched my hand. Don't tire yourself out. You deserve rest. Her hand was warm, gentle. For a second, I almost believed it again. Almost. But I saw the faint mark of a man's watch, clasp on her wrist. Too high, too new, not mine. My stomach turned. The next week, Harris called me into his office. He leaned back in his chair, casual, confident, like a man who owned the world. You're one of my best guys, he said. I trust you. I want you closer on some big projects." "Of course," I replied, steady. He smiled, that same smile I had seen on his porch. "Discretion is everything, though. We're both men who know how to keep things private." The words dripped with meaning. My blood ran hot, but I kept my face still. "I understand." He leaned forward. "Good. I like men who understand." I left his office with a file in my hands and a storm in my chest. Later, Maya stopped me in the hallway. She lowered her voice. "Listen, I don't know what's going on, but watch yourself. Harris has a way of pulling people into his shadow. People get burned." I nodded, trying not to let my face betray anything. "Thanks," I said. "You're a good guy," she added. "Don't let him use you." Her words rang louder than she knew. That night, I sat in the car outside my own house, staring at the lights glowing behind the curtains. Inside was a woman who still carried my name, who wore my ring, who told me, "See you soon and be safe," with lips that weren't only mine anymore. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. For a moment I wanted to scream, to break something, to let the rage spill out. But instead, I closed my eyes and breathed. This wasn't the time to explode. This was the time to endure. Because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't the man standing in shock on a porch anymore. I wasn't the fool fumbling with papers. I was awake now. And in that stillness, I began to see the shape of my revenge. By the time another week passed, my heart had turned to stone. I didn't feel shock anymore. I didn't feel the sting of surprise. What I felt now was something sharper, colder, a clarity that comes only when you've lost everything you thought was safe. I watched Sarah carefully each day. Her excuses grew smoother, her laughter brighter, her lies better rehearsed. She thought she was untouchable, hiding behind his walls, behind his power. And Harris, he carried himself like a king, speaking to me in the office as though nothing in the world could touch him. But that was about to change. I started small, quiet, careful. I changed nothing in my routine so neither of them would suspect. But at night, while Sarah slept with her phone under her pillow, I built my plan. I upgraded the old security camera in our driveway, not for protection, but to catch her comings and goings. Every time she left with the excuse of visiting her mother, the camera caught her car pulling away at the exact same time. I saved the footage. I bought a small voice recorder, cheap, ordinary, nothing special. I left it under the seat of her car one evening when she asked me to fetch a bag. The next day, it recorded her laughing on the phone, whispering words I never wanted to hear. His name, his promises, her sighs. Piece by piece, I collected their whispers, their meetings, their careless slips. I didn't confront them. I didn't argue. I smiled when Sarah kissed my cheek. I nodded when Harris asked for reports. All the while, I was building a case brick by brick, stronger than any lie they could invent. The perfect moment came sooner than I expected. Harris announced a small dinner at his house for a few senior employees. "A casual thing," he said with that smooth grin. "Bring your spouses, make it a family evening." I almost laughed in his face. "Family," but I simply nodded. "Of course, thank you." When I told Sarah, she looked startled for a moment, then quickly covered it with a smile. "That sounds nice," she said, though her eyes flickered away from mine. That night, as she prepared a dress and jewelry, I felt the irony twist in my gut. She was dressing for both of us, for me, her husband in name, and for him, her lover in truth. We arrived together, hand in hand like a normal couple. The house was lit warmly, laughter spilling out from the windows. Harris greeted us at the door, shaking my hand firmly, his eyes darting just for a second toward Sarah. I caught the flicker, the silent electricity. Inside, everything smelled of wine and roasted meat. Colleagues mingled, glasses clinked, polite jokes filled the air. But under the surface, the tension burned. I could see it in the way Harris lingered near Sarah, in the way her smile grew softer whenever his eyes found hers. I let it build, let it throb in the room like a silent drum. When dinner was served, Harris stood to give a short speech. He praised loyalty, trust, and the family-like bond of the company. The irony nearly split me in two. That was when I stood up. My legs felt steady, my voice calm, though my heart beat like thunder. "Loyalty," I said softly, loud enough that the room quieted. "Trust, family. Those are powerful words, Mr. Harris." He raised an eyebrow, smile fixed. "Indeed they are." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. I set it on the table, its tiny shape gleaming under the chandelier light, which is why everyone deserves to know the truth about the man who leads them. The room shifted, confused eyes, whispers. Harris's smile faltered just slightly. Sarah's face drained of color. "What do you mean?" Harris asked, his voice tightening. I clicked the remote of the small projector I'd borrowed from the office. The screen lit up with time-stamped images. Sarah's car at his house, night after night. Recordings played softly, her voice, his voice, their laughter. The silence of the room grew heavy, broken only by the sound of betrayal made public. Sarah's hand shook on her lap. Harris's face hardened, jaw clenched. "You both thought you were safe behind walls," I said, my voice steady, cold. "But walls don't keep out the truth. Not forever." Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a fork. Harris stood abruptly, his chair scraping. "Turn that off," he barked. "No," I said simply. "This is who you are. This is what loyalty and trust mean to you." I turned to my colleagues, their stunned faces reflecting shock, pity, even anger. "You can decide if this is the man you want to follow." The room was silent. Harris's career, his polished mask, his perfect power, it was cracking in front of them all. Sarah couldn't meet my eyes as we drove home. She tried to speak once, but no words came. Her hands twisted in her lap. "At home," she whispered. "I'm sorry." I looked at her long and hard, then said, "Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Sorry doesn't erase betrayal." She cried quietly that night, but I didn't comfort her. My heart had hardened too far for that. The next morning, Harris didn't show up at the office. By noon, the news spread he had stepped down temporarily, citing personal reasons. But I knew better. His walls had finally collapsed. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the weight of silence around me. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. Only a quiet kind of justice. Because sometimes revenge isn't about shouting or breaking. Sometimes it's about pulling away the mask and letting the world see the truth. And they had both been unmasked. The days after the dinner felt strangely quiet, like the world had been scrubbed clean. For years, I had lived with lies swirling around me, invisible but suffocating. Now the air was clearer, even if it still stung my lungs. At the office, people avoided saying Harris's name out loud. His office door stayed locked, his chair empty. Rumors ran like wildfire about personal issues, about inappropriate behavior. I didn't feed them. I didn't need to. The truth had already been shown. At home, Sarah moved through the rooms like a shadow. She cooked, she cleaned. She spoke when spoken to, but her eyes no longer held light. Sometimes I caught her watching me, as if waiting for a chance to explain, to rebuild. But every time she opened her mouth, I felt the weight of her laughter in his house, the sound of her whispering his name, and I couldn't let it go. One evening she finally said it. "Can we start over?" I looked at her for a long time. The woman I had once trusted more than anyone was still there, but she wasn't the same. Or maybe she was, and I had just been blind. "No," I said softly. "We can't." Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, as if she had known my answer all along. A week later she packed her things quietly. No shouting, no begging. Just silence. She left her ring on the kitchen table, its small circle catching the sunlight one last time. When the door shut behind her, I sat down and held the ring in my palm. It was heavier than it had ever been, not because of gold, but because of everything it once meant and no longer did. Betrayal doesn't just break a marriage. It breaks illusions. It forces you to see who people really are and who you really are when the mask falls. I learned that silence can be stronger than rage, that patience can be sharper than shouting, that sometimes the best revenge is not destruction, but exposure. Harris lost his position, his respect, his untouchable mask. Sarah lost the comfort of her lies. And me? I lost the life I thought I had, but I gained something else. Clarity, strength, freedom. Life doesn't end when betrayal burns through it. It begins again, raw and painful, but honest. If there's anything I carry from it all, it's this. Trust is not something to play with. Once broken, it doesn't return. And if someone thinks they can hide forever behind walls, remember, walls can fall. Lies can collapse. And when they do, the truth will echo louder than any secret ever whispered.